Well, hello class. Welcome back to the second lecture for Art 385. I hope you found the early films that you watched interesting. I know to a certain degree, those of us who've grown up with color pictures and sound and all the goodies of the modern cinema, sometimes we go back and watch these old films. It's a little bit challenging, but there is a goal, there's a purpose. One is to expose you to the reality that that is the beginning of cinema, but also secondly, to show you that even at the beginning, there was a desire to tell stories and then tell them in a way that people enjoy them. It is interesting to note, though, that from about the early 1900s, the turn of the century there, till about 1912, cinema was really just seen as a cheap form of entertainment. It really was never regarded during this era as anything that could become great in regards to art or in regards to some form of high entertainment. It was just seen as cheap entertainment. So there really, during this time, weren't any major artistic strides. George Méliès with his Trip to the Moon, Edwin Porter with The Great Train Robbery, kind of set the tone for about the level of the type of movies that, or the type of art that you would see in those movies. So it is interesting that you can go and watch all the different types of movies in this era, and they're going to look very similar. So it's really, as I said, an interesting period. During this time, also, there was a group that was formed on the East Coast called the Motion Picture Patent Company, or the MPPC. And they were also known as the Trust, which means they were a monopoly. They basically controlled what movies got made, who would make them, and etc. And part of the way they were able to control the industry was they had an exclusive deal with Kodak. If you weren't a member of the MPPC or the Trust, then you were out of luck. You couldn't get film from Kodak. You wouldn't get their little stamp at the end of the movie, which means that theaters, technically, who were part of the Trust, wouldn't be able to play your movies. So you had to join them, and that means they had power and control, and it was really pretty interesting. For the most part, Thomas Edison kind of headed this up and controlled the industry during this time. Now, it's during this time that you have really the beginning of the rise of Hollywood. See, the film industry did start on the East Coast. Thomas Edison is right there in New Jersey. The first Nickelodeons began opening up in Manhattan and spreading throughout the East Coast. It wasn't too long, though. Of course, you'd get them over in San Francisco as well. But the reality is the film industry had its beginnings in New York City and the East Coast. But there were a few people who wanted to challenge the Trust. They didn't want to be a part of it. They were making truly independent films. So there were a few people who went out to Los Angeles on the West Coast. And I have to ask you this question. If we were actually in a classroom, I would say, why do you think they went to Hollywood? What was it that attracted them to this environment? Now, some people say that they went out to the West Coast because of the climate. And the reality is, those of us who have grown up out here or live out here realize that, really, how often does it rain out here? We did get a few sprinkles over the weekend, but the reality is that for the most part, year-round, you can count on pretty temperate weather. No major rainstorms, thunderstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes, no horrible heat waves that you can't work in, no horrible freezings that you can't work in. So the reality is you have a very temperate climate, and also you have very diverse topography. Think about it. Those of us who live in the Inland Empire area, within an hour, you can be in the mountains. Within an hour, you can be at the beach. Within an hour, you can be in the desert. You can get so many different types of topography within a small area. And this attracted people. I mean, in the East Coast, you've either got trees or city. But out here in the West Coast, you can get trees in the mountains. You can get cowboy desert type scenes out in the desert. You can get beach scenes. You can get, I mean, you could shoot any type or any area of the world right here in Southern California. So that was very attractive. But as I was setting up a moment ago, one of the things that did kind of propel people out here was the escape from the trust. Like I said, if you made a movie back there in the East Coast, you could literally get shut down because you weren't part of this group. But if you're 3,000 miles away on the West Coast, now mind you, this is before any major air travel. To get out here to the West Coast, you had to take a train. It probably took a week, perhaps several days at least, to get out here. And phone lines were still a little bit early, and the Morse code. What is going on here? It's late at night. I'm forgetting the name of the apparatus that did it, the device that did it. But anyways, to get communication out here, to get out here, it wasn't just hopping on a quick flight and being here in 5 hours. So you had a bit of separation and isolation from the East Coast, which allowed you to make movies. And then if you did something that was illegal or that the trust would actually really try to bring legal ramifications against you, well, Mexico wasn't that far away. Or at least that's what some books like to allude to, that maybe some of these directors escaped beyond the border for a period of time and then came back to Los Angeles. But nonetheless, it was really in the early teens and on that Hollywood started to attract filmmakers. In the beginning, it's not going to be a big of a player. But by the late teens, almost all the major studios will have been established, and established in a way that that really kind of lays the groundwork for the golden era, the studio era, as it's called, of American cinema, at least. So I wanted to kind of set that stage there for you for a moment. Also, during the time of the early teens, particularly around 1911, 1912, 1913, you have the beginning of what is known as the feature film. And this is a film that would be several reels long. In your reading, you'll come across that a reel was a certain time period, maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the most you could get on a reel. And a feature film would be multiple reels spliced together to play a longer story. And one of the films that you're going to watch segments of tonight is D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. Now, we're going to talk about it in a moment in the next segment. But it is kind of credited as one of the first feature films. In fact, some people will say it is the first feature film. It's 3 hours long, and no, I'm not going to make you watch it all. But in a moment, we're going to talk about that. But this is the era where the feature film starts to show up, and also grand movie theaters start to show up. From 1900 to about 1910, it's seen as as a cheap art form. From 1910 and on, as the feature starts to develop, so do the theaters start to develop. And so does the idea of trying to make something that's an attraction that people want to come to. And so these grand palaces were built to watch these grand movies in. So it's really an interesting period of development. And for my next section of the lecture, we'll just touch on that a little bit, and then we'll head into D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. So talk to you in just a moment.